You know that moment when a single mom or dad is just trying to give their kid one normal afternoon, and some self-appointed neighborhood dictator turns it into a crime scene? That's exactly what happened in Serenity Grove when Karen Whitaker decided a missing pool key was worth calling the police on a widower and his teenage daughter. What she never saw coming was the quiet new guy who'd been watching her little power games for weeks, and who was about to flip the entire board upside down. The moving truck had barely left when the rumors started. Serenity Grove looked like the American dream on paper, perfectly trimmed lawns, a sparkling lake, a community pool that shimmered under the California sun, and that famous HOA that kept property values sky high. I was Ryan Caldwell, 42. Fresh off losing my wife to cancer 18 months earlier. My 15-year-old daughter Ava and I needed a fresh start. Not another battlefield. But Karen Whitaker, president of the Serenity Grove HOA for 9 glorious years, had other plans. She was the type who wore pastel cardigans like armor and smiled the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Within days of us moving in, the whispers began, that new single dad seems off. Always staring. Probably trouble. It was all based on one afternoon when I'd asked a neighbor about trash pickup rules and apparently looked too intense. Karen made sure the story spread through her private group chats and the monthly newsletter. I heard it secondhand from the mailman. I could have clapped back. I could have posted receipts. But Ava was already fragile. So I stayed quiet. Smiled politely at block parties. And watched. I watched Karen fine Mrs. Alvarez $250 for planting the wrong shade of lavender. I watched her send violation notices for basketball hoops left out 10 minutes past dusk. And I watched her smile sweetly at every HOA meeting while reminding everyone that rules are what make us a community, not a trailer park. Then came the pool. It was a Saturday. The kind of bright, warm day that makes you believe suburbs can heal you. Ava had been begging to try the community pool since we moved in. The welcome packet mentioned it as an exclusive resident amenity, but somehow forgot to include the magic key fob everyone else seemed to have. I figured it was an oversight. New residents. New system. No big deal. We laid out towels. Ava jumped in with that rare laugh I hadn't heard in months. And for 20 glorious minutes, everything felt normal. Then the gate clicked. Karen marched in wearing white capris and a visor that screamed "I summer in Aspen." Her little Yorkie trotted behind her like a four-legged deputy. She stopped at the edge of the pool, hands on hips, and called out in that syrupy voice that somehow sounded like a threat. "Excuse me. You too. Out of the water. Please. Right now." I stood up slowly. "Hi. Karen. We're residents. Just moved in a couple weeks ago." She gave me the smile. The one that said she was doing me a favor by speaking to me at all. "I'm aware, Mr. Caldwell. But you're using the pool without a valid access fob. That's a clear violation of Article 7. Section 3 of the CC&RS. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." Ava floated over. Confused. "Dad?" I kept my voice even. "Nobody gave us a fob when we closed. The realtor never mentioned it. We're not hurting anyone here." Karen's eyes narrowed with fake sympathy. "Ignorance of the rules is not a defense. I'm afraid. Property values depend on everyone following the same standards. If I let you slide, I'd have to let everyone slide. And where would we be then?" I almost laughed. Almost. "So you're telling me my daughter can't swim in the pool that our HOA fees pay for because of a missing plastic key?" She pulled out her phone. "I've already documented this. If you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to involve security." Security turned out to be the local police non-emergency line. Because nothing says community harmony like cops showing up to a father-daughter swim session. The officer who arrived looked embarrassed the second he saw the scene, a teenage girl in a swimsuit clutching a pool noodle. Me in board shorts. And Karen standing there like she'd just busted a major drug ring. "Ma'am. This is really a civil matter," he said. Karen's voice rose an octave. "Officer. This man has been a problem since he moved in. There are reports. He's been confrontational. And now he's trespassing on association property." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Officer. We live here. We pay the fees. They never issued us a fob. I have the closing paperwork if you want to see it." The cop sighed, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. He took our info, told Karen this wasn't a police issue, and left. But the damage was done. Ava was mortified. Neighbors who'd been watching from their balconies now have fresh gossip. "See. That new guy is trouble." Karen was right. That night Ava asked me quietly, "Did we do something wrong, Dad?" I hugged her and said no. But inside, something shifted. I was done being the polite new widower who took the hits to keep the peace. Karen had just made it personal. The next few weeks were a masterclass in passive-aggressive tyranny. Karen forgot to process our fob request for 3 weeks straight. Every time I called the management company, they'd say, "Mrs. Whitaker handles these personally." Fines started appearing in our mailbox for unauthorized use of amenities even though we hadn't gone back to the pool. I stayed silent. I smiled at her in the street. But every night after Ava went to bed, I started digging. I talked to Mr. Patel, who'd been fined $800 over 2 years for his non-compliant mailbox. I talked to the young couple on Maple Lane who'd been threatened with foreclosure after missing one payment because Karen had forgotten to send the correct invoice. I pulled public records. I requested every HOA financial report for the last 5 years. The pattern was beautiful in its ugliness. Dozens of families hit with escalating fines for absurd violations, grass half an inch too long. Holiday lights up one day past January 15th. Political signs, even the approved ones, left out too long. When people couldn't pay, liens were placed. Properties went into distress. And guess who just happened to run the top real estate agency in the area? Whitaker Properties. Karen's company had quietly acquired 7 homes in Serenity Grove over the past 4 years at well below market value. The fines didn't go into community improvements. A suspicious chunk funneled into administrative enhancement funds that somehow always benefited projects near properties Karen later bought. I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. A retired accountant named Gloria quietly showed me spreadsheets she'd been keeping for years. "She's been doing this since she took over," she whispered over coffee. "People are scared to speak up because she controls everything. But someone needs to stop her." I smiled. "Someone will." I spent weeks building the case like a patient chess player. I got statements. I cross-referenced bank records through public filings. I even had a friend who was a forensic accountant look at the numbers. The picture was damning. And all the while, Karen kept strutting around like the queen of Serenity Grove, posting on the neighborhood Facebook page about maintaining our beautiful standards while her own rose bushes were technically in violation of the height restrictions. The breaking point came at the quarterly HOA meeting. They called a special session to discuss recent compliance issues. Translation: Karen wanted to push through even stricter rules. I showed up early, sat in the back, and waited. The clubhouse was packed. Karen stood at the front in a crisp white blouse, smiling that predatory smile, tapping her gavel like a scepter. Thank you all for coming. As your president, it's my duty to ensure Serenity Grove remains the envy of every neighborhood in the valley. I stood up. Actually, Karen, before we get to new rules, I think the community deserves some transparency about the old ones. The room went dead quiet. I walked to the front carrying a thick folder. Not dramatically. Just calmly. Like I was returning a library book. I've been reviewing the last 5 years of HOA financials and enforcement records. Public information. Of course. And I found some interesting patterns. Karen's smile froze. Mr. Caldwell. This is not the time or place for personal grievances. If you have an issue with your pool fob. Oh. It's way past the pool fob, I said mildly. This is about the $187,000 in fines collected over 5 years. About how a disproportionate number of those fines went to families who later sold their homes to Whitaker Properties at distressed prices. About how administrative funds seem to line up perfectly with renovation costs on properties you personally flipped. I started laying documents on the table. Highlighted spreadsheets. Neighbor statements. Property transfer records. The room erupted. Mrs. Alvarez stood up. You find me for lavender? My husband had just had heart surgery. The young couple from Maple Lane spoke next. Then Gloria. Then Mr. Patel. One by one. People who'd been terrified for years finally found their voices. Karen's face went through the stages beautifully: denial, anger, bargaining, and finally raw panic. This is character assassination, she sputtered. Voice cracking. These are baseless accusations from a man who's been nothing but confrontational since he arrived. He doesn't even belong here. I tilted my head. Funny. I thought the rules applied to everyone equally. Or is that only when it's convenient? The vote to remove her was unanimous. Karen stood there for a long moment. Mouth opening and closing like a fish. Before she grabbed her purse and stormed out. The last thing I saw was her perfect visor slipping sideways as she pushed through the doors. In the weeks that followed, the air in Serenity Grove actually felt lighter. The new board, a mix of longtime residents and newer voices, started rewriting the most ridiculous rules. Fobs were issued the same day people moved in. Fines became warnings first. People started talking to each other again instead of reporting each other. Ava and I finally got to use the pool without looking over our shoulders. One evening she floated on her back and said, "Dad, you're kind of a badass." I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. But the real win wasn't just beating Karen. It was watching neighbors who'd been isolated for years start hosting barbecues again. It was seeing people realize that keeping up property values didn't have to mean living in fear. Karen tried one last comeback attempt, a nasty email blast calling me a divisive agitator, but by then nobody was listening. She sold her own house 6 months later and moved to a different development. Rumor has it she's already president of the new HOA. Some people never learn. Here's the thing about bullies who hide behind rules: they always think the system protects them. Until the day someone patient enough, quiet enough, and angry enough decides to use that same system right back. So tell me, was I wrong for taking her down? Or was Karen the one who turned a neighborhood into her personal fiefdom? Who was really violating the spirit of community here? Drop your thoughts below. And if you've got your own HOA horror story, I want to hear it. Because trust me, you're not alone.